king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 81, Leftovers from Killing Fish. Speaking of potash fertilizer, as a rural child, Marin naturally thought of phosphorus fertilizer. Crops generally require three types of fertilizers: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. In ancient times, the Chinese people applied manure fertilizer, which was actually nitrogen fertilizer, because manure contains nitrogen. However, nitrogen fertilizer alone is not enough. Europeans did not apply fertilizer, so the yield of wheat per moo was only about 100 kilograms. The Chinese people applied manure fertilizer, and the yield per moo could reach more than 200 kilograms. Later, in addition to applying manure, the Chinese also spread wood ash on the land. Wood ash contains potassium, which can barely be considered a weakened potassium fertilizer. With these two natural fertilizers, the Chinese wheat yield can reach about 300 kilograms per moo. The paddy fields in the south of the Yangtze River are full of fish and shrimps because of the ditches. These fish and shrimps are rich in phosphorus. After the fish and shrimps die, the phosphorus seeps into the ground. Its effect is equivalent to the phosphorus fertilizer in later generations. Therefore, some paddy fields in the south of the Yangtze River, which are fertilized with manure and wood ash and are rich in phosphorus, can produce up to 500 to 600 kilograms per moo. This is because these fields contain all three elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Of course, the ancients did not understand the principle of fertilizers, and did not know that dead fish and shrimps could also fertilize the fields. Therefore, it has been said that the land in the south of the Yangtze River is fertile and the land in the north is barren. In fact, this is not the case at all. Actual experience in later generations proved that as long as the three kinds of fertilizers were applied, fields in the north and the south could produce equally high yields. On the island of Texel, Marin promoted manure and plant ash. However, the plant resources on Texel were not as abundant as those in the inland. The potassium content of plant ash was very limited, so Marin sent people to the Harz Mountains to purchase bitter salt mines, potash mines, and directly used potash as potash fertilizer. However, it is very difficult to obtain this phosphate fertilizer because Marin cannot afford to offend Morocco, which is rich in phosphate fertilizer. Even Western Sahara, another place rich in phosphate fertilizer, is under the control of the Moroccans. Marin had read time travel novels before and knew that near Layoun in Western Sahara, there was a super-large phosphate mine, not far from the sea. However, it is now the territory of the Moroccans. Morocco is not too strong, but it is definitely not weak. They can easily send out 10,000 or 20,000 Arab cavalry. Therefore, if you want to seize the phosphate mines in Western Sahara, you have to ask the Moroccans first. As for trading with the Moroccans and buying phosphate ore, it might be possible in 100 years, but it's definitely not possible now, because, after the 17th century, the Roman Catholic Church declined and its authority was gone, so people could trade with pagans without any problems. But now it is the end of the 15th century, and the authority of the Catholic Church is still strong. If it were a big country like Spain or Portugal, they might not give the Vatican face. But as for the Texel island of Marin, they dared not give the Vatican face. Trading with pagans, and the Green Christians, who were the mortal enemies of Christians, could easily be declared a heresy by the Vatican. The fighting power of the Church may be average, but the Church's appeal is very strong now. If he is on the Church's blacklist, Marin will be beaten up. Therefore, before the European Reformation and religious wars, Marin would never dare to go against the Roman Catholic Church. And defeating Morocco is unlikely at present. Therefore, Marin must think of another way to solve the problem of phosphate fertilizer. I remember when I was studying chemistry in middle school, Marin heard from his junior high school chemistry teacher that fish bones and scales are rich in phosphorus. Even fish meat and fish viscera have a good phosphorus content. In other words, fish bones, fish scales, and fish viscera can also be used as low-level phosphate fertilizers. Marin thought while sitting at the table. Thinking of this, Marin took a few servants and rode to the two major fishing ports of Thornhill and Oatschild for field research. Sure enough, every time the fishing boats returned to the port, after a large amount of sea fish had been unloaded, the fishermen began to kill the fish. A large number of fish scales were hung and thrown on the ground at random. A large number of fish viscera were discarded and even thrown into the sea. After every meal, many fishermen have a lot of leftover fish bones at home, which are regarded as garbage and thrown away at will. Damn! What a waste! Marin, who was conducting the inspection, couldn't help but feel distressed. "Master, what's wrong?" asked the follower Shower. "These are all excellent phosphate fertilizers. They are just thrown away like this." Phosphate fertilizer. What is that? Saul had a head full of question marks. You wouldn't understand even if I told you, Marin shook his head. The next day, Marin issued an order, ordering all fishermen in the 2 major fishing ports to collect and hand in all the leftovers, except for fish gallbladders containing highly toxic cyanide, and the fish bones left after eating fish. Anyone who litters without permission will be fined. Marin plans to organize people to dry and crush the collected fish scales, fish viscera, fish bones and other fish waste to make natural green fertilizer similar to wood ash. Or, throw them directly into the manure pit to ferment with feces and wood ash. Although the phosphorus content of this fish waste is far less than that of phosphate fertilizer, it can also provide similar effects to wood ash. Moreover, thanks to Marin's strong support, there are now more than 20 large fishing boats with a displacement of 100 tons in the 2 fishing ports of Thalynch and Odysseald. Every day, the 2 fishing ports process dozens of tons of fish scraps. The phosphorus content of these scraps is at least about 1%. Although it is not as high as special phosphate fertilizer, it can still be used as phosphate fertilizer if used in large quantities. The 3 types of fertilizers, manure, nitrogen fertilizer, potash fertilizer, potassium salt, and phosphate fertilizer, fish waste, were fully applied. Not to mention reaching the level of 1,000 kilograms per mu in later generations, it was at least about the same as the yield of the best paddy fields in Jiangnan during the Ming dynasty, reaching 500 to 600 kilograms per mu. In other words, Marin plans to use the fish scraps that were originally discarded by fishermen as garbage as the most primitive natural phosphate fertilizer. Chapter 82, Formation of the Square. As time entered late autumn, the musket craftsmen and armor craftsmen that Marin had been expecting were recruited from Spain and southern Germany respectively. In order to recruit these craftsmen, Marin went through a lot of trouble because he was extremely short of talent and none of his men knew Spanish. For this reason, Marin had no choice but to seek help from Jewish merchants who traveled all over Europe. But the tragedy was that Jewish merchants were doing well in other countries, but it was a tragedy in Spain. Because as early as 1492, Spain, including the Kingdom of Aragon and the Kingdom of Castile, persecuted the Jews under the auspices of the 2 husband and wife kings. Except for a small number of Jews who converted to Catholicism, most of the Jews in Spain were expelled, and their property was confiscated and robbed. Therefore, the powerful Jewish merchants could not go to anti-Semitic Spain to help Marin hire craftsmen to make the musket. Fortunately, a Jewish merchant came up with a solution. He asked an Italian merchant he knew to go to Spain to hire musket craftsmen on his behalf. In this way, after paying double commission, Marin finally obtained 20 Spanish craftsmen who were skilled in making muskets. The recruitment of armor craftsmen was much smoother, because armor craftsmen basically came from southern Germany. Marin hired a few eloquent businessmen and asked them to hire 30 armor craftsmen from Augsburg, Nuremberg and other regions. In fact, Marin was not short of armor, and he had 1,000 sets of plate armor captured from France. However, full-body plate armor was too heavy and only suitable for heavy armored knights. However, what Marin wanted to do was the Spanish phalanx, which was mainly composed of infantry. Therefore, even if the breastplate of the full-body armor was removed and worn, it was still a bit cumbersome. In addition, cumbersomeness was still light. The main reason was that the waist of the full-body armor was restricted by the plate armor itself, making it inconvenient to turn around and move. Marin recruited these armor craftsmen to make steel helmets and breastplates. In addition, they also had to make chain mail belts. As infantrymen, the breastplate they wear is naturally a 3/4 breastplate with 2 iron plates in front and back. However, this breastplate has no defense against the waist. If the enemy spearman stabs at the waist, it will be terrible. Therefore, Marin thought about it and equipped the soldiers with chain mail belts that do not affect their movements. It has a certain degree of protection and does not affect their movements. After the craftsmen arrived, Marin quickly imported a large number of iron ingots and iron chains, for making chain mail belts, from Britain, and made them muskets and infantry 3-piece suits, steel helmets, 3/4 breastplates and chain mail belts. Of course, the forging of spears and engineer shovels was not left out. After a long period of overtime work, by the end of November, the craftsmen had produced 200 muskets and a large number of infantry 3-piece suits. With the equipment, the issue of recruiting phalanx infantry was immediately put on the agenda. Marin remembered that the earliest German mercenaries seemed to come from Alsace, Württemberg, Baden and Tyrol, Austria. The peasants of Alsace and the mountain people of Württemberg were the main force of the early German mercenaries, Landsknechts. Alsace is located on the border between the Holy Roman Empire and France. The land here is fertile. However, there are many people and little land. Therefore, there is a large amount of surplus labor here. For example, the surplus serfs driven out by the manor owners. As for the Württemberg region, it goes without saying that most of the area is mountainous, with many mountain people, who are also quite tough. This is somewhat similar to the Swiss region. Swiss mercenaries are basically composed of Swiss mountain people. The people living in the mountains have good physical fitness because they often walk on mountain roads. In addition, they live off the mountains and often go into the mountains to hunt, and they may even have to fight with wild beasts. Moreover, because the mountainous areas are barren, they often have to endure hunger, so they have good willpower. Therefore, their survival and fighting abilities often exceed those of farmers in the plains. For example, the brave Danyang soldiers in the Three Kingdoms period came from the mountainous Danyang County, now Schwancheng, Anhui, not the Danyang that sells glasses today. Kahn and Kohler were from the edge of the Black Forest in the Duchy of Württemberg. Marin considered that the Tyrol region of Austria was the private land of the Habsburg family, and the people here were often more loyal to the Habsburg family. Therefore, Marin first ruled out recruiting soldiers in the Tyrol region. Then, Marin's only options were Alsace and Baden-Württemberg. After thinking it over, Marin decided to recruit half of the people in each of the two regions. Of course, it was Kohler who went to Baden-Württemberg to recruit soldiers. Kahn brought a team of soldiers with him to protect Kohler and bring the recruits back to Texel. The one who went to Alsace to recruit soldiers was Schwartz. He would be responsible for recruiting bankrupt farmers and serfs in Alsace. The farmers in Alsace might not be as strong as the brave Württemberg mountain people, but they were obedient and disciplined. However, these soldiers who were born as serfs were obedient but lacked courage. Therefore, Marin needed some brave Württemberg mountain people to lead these Alsatian peasants. The courage of the mountain people would stimulate the Alsatian peasants to become braver. And the discipline of the Alsatian peasants would infect those overly free mountain people. It can be said that the two can influence each other. What Marin has to do is to mix the two, let them influence each other, and control them to develop in a good direction. As for Frundsberg, the father of German mercenaries, Marin did not arrange for him to go out to participate in recruiting soldiers. In Germany, recruiting soldiers is a very important ability. If a person can recruit a large number of mercenaries in a short period of time, then this person will definitely attract attention. Because this is an era when mercenaries are popular. Whoever has more mercenaries will have a higher status. Obviously, Schwartz and the Kahn brothers are Marin's confidants. The training of recruiting ability will naturally give priority to them. And Frundsberg is the thug that Marin intends to give to the emperor, not Marin's confidant. Therefore, Marin does not want to cultivate the ability to recruit soldiers, which is an important ability in the mercenary era. Moreover, because Marin recruited a lot of Frisian fishermen, he was also worried that the Frisian Republic of Nobles would come to trouble him. Therefore, Marin also needed Frundsberg to garrison Denburg with the remaining 300 men to guard against possible attacks from the Frisian Republic of Nobles. At the same time, Marin promised Frundsberg that he would be the leader of the first phalanx on Texel Island. This made the young Frundsberg very excited and grateful to Marin. As for the little thing that he was not asked to recruit soldiers, Frundsberg immediately let it go. Before Schwartz and Kahn set out to recruit soldiers, Marin specifically told them not to recruit the unemployed vagrants in the city. Because many of these unemployed vagrants in the city were born as gangsters, and they were strong on the outside but weak on the inside, bullying the weak and afraid of the strong. It was okay to let them fight in a favorable battle, but when they encountered a tough battle, they would easily lead the way and run away. Although the serfs and mountain people were not very knowledgeable, they were relatively simple and obedient. They were simple-minded and did not have the scheming of the city people, so they were the easiest to fool. As long as these people were trained and fooled, they would definitely be a powerful military force. Chapter 83, Coastal Defense Artillery. Marin's worries became a reality. Through intelligence brought by some merchants, he learned that the Frisian noble republic across the sea was very dissatisfied with Marin's large-scale recruitment of Frisian fishermen. Most of the fishermen's catch was originally handed over to the nobles of Frisian. However, Marin recruited them, which was equivalent to directly robbing the interests of the nobles of Frisian. Therefore, the parliament of the Frisian Noble Republic in Groningen is discussing whether to teach Marin a lesson. The Frisian nobles did not dare to kill Marin, as that would break the rules and offend the emperor, giving him an excuse to annex the island. However, there was no problem in sending troops to attack Texel Island, plundering it, and bringing back the recruited Frisian fishermen. No one would gossip about it because it was Marin who robbed the Frisian fishermen first. Marin certainly would not sit still and wait for death, so he planned to strengthen the defense of Texel Island. Although Texel is an island, it is quite special because it is not accessible from all four sides. The main problem is that 2/3 of the coast around Texel Island is a very shallow sea area. Whenever the tide goes out, 2/3 of the shallow sea around Texel Island will turn into a beach with silt accumulation. After the tide rises, it becomes a shallow sea again. If a ship is sent to land in these areas, it is easy for the ship to run aground. Small boats are fine, but large ships must not approach the coast in these areas, otherwise they will definitely run aground. In the entire island of Texel, only the Mars Channel in the southern waters and the Otisfield area on the southeast coast are areas with sufficient water depth, which are suitable for larger ships to dock and for landing. Therefore, to prevent the attack of the Frisian Noble Republic, it was only necessary to deploy defenses in the coastal areas to the south and southeast of the island. The focus of the deployment was on Terholland and Ootskilde and the nearby coast. The most effective way to defend against the attack of the Frisian Noble Republic is to build a fort. The fort can be equipped with heavy artillery to bombard the enemy's ships. Moreover, the forts were generally built of stone, which had strong resistance to iron ball shells. But ships were different. Until the mid-19th century, the current ships were all wooden hulls. Their resistance to iron ball shells was very limited. Wooden warships would definitely suffer a loss when fighting against the coastal defense guns in the stone fortresses. Moreover, the coastal defense guns could be made very large and heavy, and very powerful. However, the guns on wooden ships were often subject to great restrictions and could not be made too heavy. Otherwise, if a small boat was equipped with a large gun, the recoil of the large gun might capsize the wooden boat. Therefore, Marin immediately decided to build coastal defense batteries at the two ports of Thorlund and Oudeschild to guard against possible attacks from the Frisian Noble Republic. Texel Island had no ability to make cannons, nor did it have cannon-making craftsmen. It was still the end of the 15th century, and cannon-casting craftsmen were definitely still the top talents in Europe. Even in those big countries, craftsmen who could cast cannons were high-end talents. Marin could easily recruit musket craftsmen, but it was difficult to recruit cannon-casting craftsmen. Therefore, he had no choice but to buy cannons. To this end, Marin sent people and hired Jewish businessmen to help inquire about the source of the artillery. After inquiring, Marin learned that the Holy Roman Empire's cannon casting level was very average, and it could only cast small bronze cannons for land warfare. This was because the Holy Roman Empire was a land-based country. Moreover, the southern part of the empire was close to the Alps, and the cannons needed to be portable and able to cross the Alps. Therefore, the cannons could not be cast very large. The cannons required for the coastal defense turrets must be heavy cannons. Therefore, the cannons of the Holy Roman Empire obviously did not meet the requirements. In addition, France is also a country that attaches great importance to cannon casting and has good cannon casting technology. However, Marin made Charles VIII lose face. Therefore, it is impossible to buy cannons from the French. Therefore, Marin can only turn his attention to other countries, Britain, Portugal and Spain. However, the feedback from the people sent out was not good. Feedback from people sent to Spain and Portugal indicated that the most popular cannon in Spain and Portugal was the bronze breech-loading cannon, which was called the François cannon in the Ming dynasty. This type of gun has a range of only 2,000 feet, 666 meters, according to Ming dynasty records, and is definitely not suitable for use as a coastal defense gun. Even if it is used as a naval gun, its power is still a bit too small. However, since the age of navigation had just begun, Europeans did not pay much attention to the power of naval guns. Therefore, it was reasonable that this kind of small-power bronze cannon was popular. The development of European artillery technology was around the 16th century. Due to the needs of naval warfare, heavy artillery such as the red cannon was developed. Moreover, bronze cannons cannot be made with a large caliber because bronze has a major flaw: it easily becomes soft after being overheated. Small caliber bronze cannons are fine, but large caliber ones are different. Large caliber cannons have very high chamber pressure. When the barrel is overheated, the barrel wall softens. Although bronze is not as soft as pure copper after overheating, it softens after all. Small caliber chamber pressure is fine, but large caliber cannons have very high chamber pressure, which can easily cause the inner wall of the barrel to deform when fired under overheating conditions. In this case, the cannon is useless. Therefore, bronze cannons cannot be cast too large, only small and medium-sized. If you want to cast heavy cannons, you can only choose to cast cannons with iron. Moreover, cast iron cannons are much cheaper than bronze cannons. After all, before the development of the Falun copper mine in Sweden and the Dutch obtained Japanese copper, the price of copper in Europe was still very expensive. Using a large amount of copper to cast heavy cannons is absolutely expensive. Marin was disappointed at first, but good news came from the UK. The personnel sent to Britain to purchase artillery were divided into several groups. The first few groups did not bring good news. But the people sent to Sussex County, or Sussex County, in Britain brought back good news. Sussex, located on the southeast coast of the United Kingdom, has always been a developed region in the United Kingdom and is also the center of British iron smelting. Since the middle of the 15th century, when cast iron blocks were invented in Dijon, France, this technology has gradually spread abroad and reached Weald, Sussex, across the sea from France, more than a decade ago. As a result, artillery foundries in Weald, Sussex, began to try to use cast iron to cast cannons, because cast iron was much cheaper than bronze. After more than 10 years of attempts, a cannon foundry in Sussex County cast a cast iron coffin long-barreled cannon using cast iron blocks. According to the description of his subordinates, this cast iron cannon, which is still under trial, is a 12-pound cannon. Originally, the old cannon foundry master Johnson wanted to cast an 18-pound Cufflin long-barreled cannon. However, the cast iron technology of this era. When Johnson used an 18-pound caliber, the barrel often exploded due to steel quality problems. As a result, Johnson's nephew was seriously injured and left disabled. In desperation, Johnson had to reduce the caliber without reducing the total weight, making the cast iron cannon a 12-pounder. Old Johnson almost spent all his family's money to develop this heavy front-loading cast iron cannon. At present, he has only made initial progress. Old Johnson's goal is to upgrade the cast iron cannon to an 18-pound heavy cannon. Then, use this unique technology to ask the king for a reward. 18-pound Cufflin long-barreled cannon. Could this be the legendary red cannon? Marin was surprised. He remembered that more than a century later, the first batch of red cannons sold by the Portuguese to the Ming dynasty seemed to be the 18-pound Cufflin long-barreled cannons salvaged from British shipwrecks. And this old gunsmith named Johnson might be one of the earliest developers of the red cannons. This is a talented person, we must not let him go. So Marin ordered people to go to Weald in Sussex, England, to recruit the old Johnson family to come to Texel Island to cast cannons for Marin. Marin's men had already inquired about it, because the aftermath of the War of the Roses in England was still going on, and Henry VII was still struggling to clean up the opposition in the country. Therefore, he had not paid attention to the cannon casting. And old Johnson was not a regular, royal cannon casting master in the kingdom, but just a folk cannon casting craftsman who had worked with regular craftsmen to cast cannons. Moreover, old Johnson's cast iron cannon had not yet been finalized and produced, nor had it been recommended to the kingdom, let alone adopted and valued. Therefore, old Johnson is not yet considered a British national treasure-level gunsmith. Therefore, it is not difficult to recruit old Johnson, at least there will be no obstruction from the British government. Marin specially sent Denburg Mayor Heidel Lehmann to Weald, Sussex, to secretly recruit the Johnson family. After offering the young men of the Johnson family a high salary of 1 shilling a day, the average daily wage for craftsmen was only 3 pence, the Johnson cannon casting family moved to Denburg on Texel Island as a whole and began to cast cannons exclusively for Marin. As for the problem of old Johnson's bursting barrel, Marin actually had a solution long ago. The reason why cast iron cannons burst is nothing more than the pig iron used to cast the cannon, which has too many impurities, such as sulfur and phosphorus, making the cannon barrel brittle. In addition, the pig iron has too high carbon content. Although it has high strength, it lacks toughness and is not very suitable for casting cannons. In fact, wrought iron and medium and low carbon steel are really suitable for casting cannons. Although Marin was not an expert in steelmaking, he had learned a lot of theories from many time travel novels. For example, he knew that an important secret of the British early iron cannons was that they used reverberatory furnaces to refining pig iron. The so-called reverberatory furnace is a relatively closed furnace, including air inlet and outlet. After pig iron and scrap iron are put into the furnace, the heat in the furnace cannot dissipate due to the relatively closed space. After reaching the top and wall of the furnace, it is reflected back to concentrate the iron material. After several hours of refining, some slag-forming agents are added. The simplest slag-forming agent is quicklime, which can be used to remove sulfur and phosphorus. Then, after cleaning up the waste slag, due to density problems, the waste slag usually floats on the molten iron, so you can just pick it up, you get wrought iron or steel. The carbon content needs to controlled. The famous open hearth steelmaking furnace is actually just a reverberatory furnace with a heat storage chamber added. The British Empire had fully mastered the reverberatory furnace refining technology in the 18th century, which also made the iron cannons cast by the British of high quality and not easy to explode. However, because the French did not understand this technology, until the early 19th century, naval guns were still prone to explosion. It was not until the mid-19th century that France and other European powers initially learned about the reverberatory furnace refining technology. But then, the open hearth furnace appeared, and mankind entered the open hearth steelmaking era. And artillery also entered the era of forged cannons from cast cannons. The so-called forged cannon is to put the steel column under a large hydraulic press of several thousand tons or even tens of thousands of tons, and cold forge it under high pressure to make the internal structure of the steel column extremely compact and strong. Then, the forged steel column is drilled with a high-strength drill bit to obtain a gun barrel with a very strong and durable wall. The cast cannon, because the molecular structure of the gun body is relatively loose, can withstand a much lower chamber pressure than the forged cannon of the same volume. Therefore, the gun body of the early cast cannon is generally very thick. The gun body of modern forged cannons is relatively slender. Marin is not a steel major, but he has read a lot of related technical posts. He can't do it himself, but he can still instruct others to do it. For example, the structure of this reverberatory furnace is very simple. He could easily command the craftsman to make one, and then make high-quality wrought iron and steel. Then, he could use wrought iron or medium-low carbon steel to cast cannons, which would definitely be much better than the cast iron cannons with a lot of impurities in this era, and would not easily explode. Of course, the reverberatory furnace technology is an advanced technology that only appeared in the 18th century, so Marin naturally cannot disclose it casually. Therefore, he considered using serfs with restricted freedom to do this. Because serfs cannot leave their place of residence at will, there is no condition to disclose the technology. Even the life and death of the serf's entire family is controlled by the lord, and the risk and cost of betrayal are extremely high. Craftsmen recruited like Old Johnson are free in status. If someone else offers a high price, he may not be able to help but disclose the technology. Moreover, before coming to Texel Island, Old Johnson signed an agreement with Hayter Lehman, stipulating that Texel Island shall not restrict their personal freedom. In this regard, Marin must also abide by the contract. Otherwise, he will not be able to recruit more craftsmen. Of course, that was all later. The most important thing for Marin right now was to get the Johnson family to help him cast more 12-pound cast iron cannons for coastal defense. At present, 3-pound, 4-pound, and 6-pound guns are more popular in Europe, and guns over 10 pounds are considered heavy artillery. Marin used 12-pound guns in coastal artillery positions, which was definitely enough to suppress the warships of the Frisian Noble Republic. Because, according to intelligence, the largest caliber artillery on the several warships owned by the Frisian Noble Republic was only a 6-pounder, which was no match for the 12-pounder.